Welcome to Be Customer Led, where we'll explore how leading experts in customer and employee experience are navigating organizations through their own journey to be customer led and the actions and behaviors employees and businesses exhibit to get there. And now, your host, Bill Staikos.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Be Customer Led. Super special guest for you all this week. Kerry Goyette is founder and president of Aperio Consulting Group. Now, Aperio works with a lot of organizations, whether that's analytics and whether it's on corporate, they're a corporate consulting firm, but they work a lot on employee experience, analyzing teams, and how to build high-performing teams. We're going to get into all that in more detail. Kerry, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me, Bill. I'm excited.
The stuff that we're talking about today, folks, is so topical. So strap in, put your seatbelts on, get your pen and paper out. You're going to be taking notes. This is going to be a great conversation. So, Kerry, we always ask every guest to start off just a little bit of background and context, just share your journey. And feel free, obviously, to go back as far as you would like. But, you have this, outside of running your business for over 10 years, you also have a really interesting background. So how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's interesting as you kind of look back at, and I'm sure a lot of people could say the same thing, like look at our journey and you kind of realize, wow, how did I end up here? But yeah, so my postgraduate studies were in psychometrics. I'm a certified forensic interviewer, and I just am passionate about studying human behavior and became even more passionate about studying human behavior in the workplace. And so I love business. I love to see systems and kind of just analyze systems and how they work. And, what better place to do that than the workforce? And so I just became just passionate about it. And it's kind of, I know everybody can say like, we are going through hard times and I don't want to minimize that. But from a behavioral scientist, I can say I am rolling up my sleeves and I just am so excited because there's a lot going on. There's a lot that's coming to play, and it's just a great study in human behavior.
So let's start there and just talk a little bit about Aperio, because some of our listeners may not be familiar with the company and the work that you're doing. So just, what do typical engagements look like? How do you work with clients? Let's just start there maybe.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of leadership teams, and I would say what we do really well, I think, some of it's the background in forensic interviewing. What we love to do is go in and diagnose issues. So it can be problems, or it can be just, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve. And, we're kind of struggling trying to, hit these great goals. And so we step back and really analyze it from a human behavior standpoint. There's lots of stuff out there on tools and whatnot. And what I've found over the years in looking at human behavior is we often look at human behavior from an isolated lens, like humans are in a vacuum. And so when you talk about potential, like, oh, I have these great strengths. Yeah, but those great strengths can only be leveraged and only be seen in the right environment. And so the environment has such an incredible impact. And so depending on what's going on in your organization, who else is on your team, and how are the personalities working together, that it's just not as simple as saying like, okay, we need to hire this person that has these great strengths. Yeah, that may be true, but there are a lot of other factors. And so that's where I really like to dig in. And when you do that, I will say, my clients, why, my firm kind of, started 10 years ago and thought, I don't know, this is starting a business is way harder than I thought. And I just thought, gosh, where's this going to go? And my business got built by referral. And so I say that because that means a lot to me, because that means we do good work and we get good results. And I think what my leaders are realizing is that when you really focus on, engineering teams and getting people coordinated and working well together, you can outperform any other team with higher IQ and more experience. And so there is tremendous business value to do this.
So I love that. And the work that you're doing, you're bringing obviously a lot of analytical capabilities into the mix. I'm curious just kind of, how Aperio has evolved over the last 10 years or so. How has analytics technology shaped the work that you're doing with companies, or even how organizations themselves are applying these capabilities in a way to improve cultures, teams, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I'll go back a little further. I was raised by an engineer, so math and science was just crammed down my,
Love that.
all of my family, they're all engineers. So they were so disappointed when I wanted to study the brain. But I think that objective approach, really looking at validated research, is just part of my DNA. And so that's really, I would say, like a core value of our firm is let's rely on empirically validated evidence, data. How can we use this to support what we're doing? And when we do that, and humans are hard. We didn't study as leaders or business owners. We didn't necessarily study how to lead human beings. And so it is challenging. But when you base it on theory and validated research, I will tell you the results are very consistently positive and predictable. And so that's what we do. But academic and business don't talk very well. So what we do is we gather kind of all of that, all of the academic research, and then we translate it to the business world in something that's practical, pragmatic, and actionable. And so that's kind of where my history has been. And so I saw this trend coming, and a lot of people are like, gosh, you wrote a book on emotional intelligence, you have a TED Talk on motivation, like AI, like what? But it actually fits perfectly because AI is just kind of new math, if you will. I think we build it up to something really dramatic, and it is awesome and very powerful. But it's another objective measurement tool that is at our disposal to use. And so when I've worked with leaders, whether it was, Lean or Six Sigma in the 80s, we all like get so excited and gravitate towards something. But then it's like, oh, shoot, human beings are involved. So now we need to have Lean and Six Sigma leadership training. And it's like, okay, here we go. Like I saw this trend. Like, here we go with AI and data. Like everybody's so excited about it. And it's going to be like, the crystal ball. No, it's not. Humans are involved. It's going to be really messy. So 3 years ago, we dug into AI because we wanted to figure out this synergy. I had a hypothesis, and that hypothesis turned out to be true. But I will be honest, when I went into it, I thought, okay, I have no idea. And you know how that is as an entrepreneur. You kind of like, all right, I'm going all in, but I have no idea how this is going to turn out. And let me also say, I'll just be completely authentic. I knew zero about AI. So you want to talk about talk about bringing out all my vulnerabilities. But we dug into it because I had this hypothesis with seeing other trends that, okay, humans are involved. And so that's where the problem is going to be. And so sure enough, you look at AI initiatives, 90% of AI initiatives fail. It's due to the, the human machine interaction. And so our quest has been, this is great technology that of course can be used for bad or used for good. But how can we figure out how to partner to really help the human and also help the organization in a way that's beneficial to both? And I think it's possible. And I think we've demonstrated that. I think it's messy. And I think a lot of people are trying to engage with it, which I think is a good thing. But, it's going to be messy for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, part of it, I feel like, is such a change management effort as well, or that is such a big part of it, getting people to understand, not be afraid of it, ask the right questions, think about it with the right use cases, et cetera. When you think about measuring, whether it's strengths or weaknesses around cultures, around teams, high performing, low performing, how does Aperio in your organization, how do you approach that measurement? And then how does AI play a role in that and identifying opportunities?
Yeah. So I'll first start off with a little bit of the history because I think context here matters. A lot of the KPIs today are born out of the, industrial era. So, when we were, when we had assembly lines and so it's easy, like how many widgets did we get through? And it's easy to measure performance. The problem now is we're in the knowledge era. And I have leaders all the time, like, how do I know my employees are working? They're virtual. Like, how do I know? Like, and then, but here's the thing I will bring up that nobody is talking about, Bill. Do you know one of the reasons why employees these days are so stressed out and burnt out? Because they don't know what drives success. So they are like, okay, I don't know what the performance metrics are necessarily. So I'm going to do 25 million things And at the end of the day, they don't even feel like they're really adding value. And how demotivating to the human spirit is that? So that's a part of the conversation I'm really passionate about because, we don't have the right metrics. And we know we have all this data, but most of my clients are like, we have all this data. We don't know what to do with it. And our data scientists don't know how to speak English that the, that the executives can understand, and the executives don't know how to speak data science language. There's just all of these kind of things that are going on that are really kind of causing some of this environment. And again, that's where I think if we take a behavioral science approach and say, not what can we get from the data, but what does a human need to know? What does the leader need to know to make a better decision? And how does that need to be served up to the leader? And then with employees, like we need to better, we have this data, we have capabilities. How can we better start to tell them, like, here's truly what drives performance? And let's cut through the chaos. Let's get rid of all these things. And if you can focus on these three things, this is where you're going to drive the most value. This is where you're going to have the biggest impact. And now all of a sudden they feel like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. They have more clarity because back in the Industrial Revolution, it was very clear. I got to get this many widgets through. Now it's less clear. And so that our brains hate uncertainty. So we can provide some clarity for them. And now they can really focus on what matters and they can see how it's driving value to the company. And that's what we ultimately want to do. We want to feel like our work matters. And when we feel like it doesn't matter, then all of a sudden it's like, well, why am I doing this?
That's right. And everyone's resigning, and largely due because no one knows what success looks like anymore, right? Do you have any favorite? I mean, every company can be different. Let's caveat by that, right? First, but and I agree with you. We're still, or many organizations, I shouldn't just blanket, but many organizations are still using 50-year-old metrics to manage their organization. Even in past lives, I've heard of, and CEOs saying, like, how can we make our employees more productive? I'm like, who cares if I produce 100 widgets? If our customers want to buy one of them, I've wasted 99% of my time, right?
Exactly.
So how do we think about efficacy and what does that mean, et cetera? Like, so how are there measures or are there different ways to be thinking about this, counsel that you can provide to listeners, and how they might be able to approach similar problems?
Yeah. So this is what we have done. So I'll just kind of walk you through and share our approach and how it's worked for clients. But, number one, the first step is exploratory. Most of my organizations have raw, messy data.
Most of them.
And so, right. So,
and it's owned by different people too, right? It's not just.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we literally had a conversation the other day and it was like, no, we don't have that data. And we just asked the question 3 different ways. And finally somebody goes, oh, well, we do, but it's over here in this system. It's like, okay, the data exists. It's just over here. First of all, I would just say every client who comes in with like, I'm so embarrassed. Our data is a mess. Number one, just don't. Everybody says that. So if you're feeling that's the norm. That's okay. But the first step is exploratory, meaning that we have to raw, messy data has a lot of gold nuggets in it, but it requires careful processing. Yeah. And so our firm, we use a data mining approach and machine learning. And so what we do is we take this messy data. Like, let's say we're looking for, one client, we looked at sales. So we took all of their messy data from their CRM. And so our algorithm is able to really scan that data set and isolate those key variables that are driving that performance. So sales is easy because we have a good performance metric, revenue, or if we're looking at retention. And so this is where I will say technology can be our friend, because what AI can do that helps humans is that it can see patterns and it can work with tons and tons of data. So we just tell clients, give us all your data. And it's messy and it's unruly, but then the algorithm just cuts through that. And it will say, okay, so for sales, for you, for this organization, here's what really matters. And so now we can get really focused. And so for this organization, for the VP of sales, it was groundbreaking because, I mean, this sounds like, like something like, the VP of sales should have known, but the data was able to identify this little hidden pattern of customers that they had in year one. They had a retention issues with customers that had bought from them once. And so it was a $22 million opportunity that nobody was focused on. And it
Wow.
highlighted to the VP and the sales VP. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And so it can pull out little nuggets for you, and it does it in seconds. I mean, that's the beauty of it. It does it in seconds. And so that's where, I think that AI can be our friend. It combs through lots of data. It sees all these weird, it can look at look at data in all different ways.
Yep.
And then it pulls out what's important. And then more importantly, it can also get rid of what doesn't matter. Now, because we focus on behavioral science for this particular client, we had assessments. And so we were able to look at the sales people and look at their data, their assessment data. And we found that there was one critical factor that led to success, literally correlated to revenue in a one-to-one relationship. And it was an optimal level of perseverance, not too high. Interestingly, it looks at it on a spectrum. So not too high because that salesperson would be rigid, not too low or they wouldn't follow through enough. But then the data from that, we can say, okay, so what does perseverance mean? The data can spit back and tell you, here's what perseverance means. They're staying on calls 22% longer. So it's not just perseverance, which is something very conceptual. And that's what I've struggled with up until AI is like, well, it's perseverance. And then they'll be like, well, how do I train that? Now it's like, now we can figure out how to train it. So not only does it help in identifying what truly matters, but it reveals hidden risk factors, or it reveals opportunities that you didn't realize. And more importantly, it cuts through the chaos and the noise. And I will just say one other important side benefit that people don't realize: everybody's trying to collect data, but nobody knows what to do with it, or they're not really good at figuring out what to do with it. It's expensive to collect a lot of data, and it's expensive to keep. And so the benefit of doing this is you see what data do you need and what data doesn't matter. Let's just stop. Let's get rid of it. Let's stop collecting it. Yeah. And so for us, it's just a great way to, it just checks the box of so many things. Now, again, we've been working on this problem for 3 years. This was not an easy problem to solve, but it can be solved.
So at a prior company I worked for, we were a Microsoft shop. So we had workplace analytics. And one of the things that we were looking at was our hypothesis was certain behaviors around customers led to better experiences for that customer, which obviously would lead to higher revenues, et cetera. And Microsoft Workplace Analytics basically tracks the digital exhaust on hundreds of different metrics. You're probably familiar with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right down to, are people pinging on Teams while they're on a call as well, right? So really interesting stuff. A lot of organizations don't have access to that richness of data. Where do you start? If you're like, I don't even know if I have anything that's useful. How can you start small in this space?
Yeah, I think number one, just you can hire people on Upwork. I would take what data you have and have somebody analyze it and say, okay, is there anything there? So that's the exploratory part. And honestly, that part isn't really that hard for a data scientist. So that's not a difficult problem to solve. Send your data out, have them spit out an analysis. The second step that we've built that's predictive is, creating an algorithm so that we can now predict. So it can now notify ahead of time, like, hey, VP of sales, we see a dip in this. You need to, to be on this. And here's what it's seeing. So that now the VP can go oh, great. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I know what that means. They've got the subject matter expertise, they can go deal with it. That step is something only right now that I know of that we have built. And that's the three, but that's the easy part. But I would say first step is the exploratory part. Let's just get your data analyzed, see what you have, ask that data scientist, hey, are we collecting, based on what you see, are we collecting the right data? Should we, be collecting other data? And it's messy, but it's not, it's messy. And I would say that's the hardest part. It's messy, but you can do it and just send it out to a professional to do.
Yeah. And it takes time.
For a small organization. Yeah. It takes time.
And it takes time. I remember when I put a project plan in front of my direct leader at this company, it was a year out before we would even start to identify anything meaningful. And they were like, we need to do this in 3 months. I was like, not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. Right.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about, you're doing all this work globally. And I want to bring it back to your point around employees not being able to understand what a success looked like. And they're doing a million different things as a result, trying to figure out kind of like what's going to stick against the wall. That clearly is leading to people to look elsewhere, pick up the phone, talk to a recruiter, et cetera. Like, are you seeing other things that are shaping sort of the great resignation? Like, what else are you I'm just curious to hear your perspective, given you work with so many clients. What else are you seeing kind of shape the kind of environment around us right now?
Yeah. Well, sometimes to complex problems, I think we like to throw simple answers at them. But I would say we've been monitoring this trend for years. And so I'm honestly not surprised by it, just because we look at multiple factors going into it. So it's not just COVID. COVID accelerated what was already in motion. Yes, it added some punch to it. And so, yes,
Sure.
It's not just about millennials and Gen Z. Do they have some kind of interesting traits about them? Yeah, how we grow up, our context, what happens in our environment matters. But no, it's also not the technology, it's not school, it's all of that and more. And so it's just there it's kind of like a perfect storm. You could call it a storm in a negative sense, but it's just a lot of these factors that are playing a part of that. But I've been talking about this for years because the birth rate went down after the Industrial Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It went down simply because people realized kids were economic liability, and so now we have to pay for childcare to go to work instead of, having them tend the farm and helping us. So the birth rate went down. They just became more expensive and harder. And two, women started entering the workforce. So it really masked some of from the workforce. It kind of masked that the birth rate had gone down because women were entering it. But now what happened with COVID, the pandemic, women left the workforce. Why? Because they had just so many pressures of kids and school and other factors that they left in droves. And so now it's becoming apparently obvious because males went down significantly. And so now it just feels like a bigger punch, but really that's not new. It's just being highlighted right now. And then on top of that, because of technology, now we have a skills gap. And so we're having to be retrained and technology is picking up some of the rote routine things that honestly a lot of humans didn't like to do. So in some ways that's good, but there's a skills gap. And so now you've got the Gen Xers and baby boomers that are really having to step up their game on technology. And again, we've got an issue there because now we always try to fix things that maybe require a fine scalpel with a sledgehammer, but we're now like, okay, we just need younger people. Let's hire a bunch of younger people. And now we've got a lot of ageism going on. And really, Gen Xers are good. Like, they're good managers. They're hard workers. It pays. There was some recent research that came out. It pays to upskill them, get them upskilled on technology. And so that's where we're having to do a lot of reverse mentoring, Gen Zers mentoring the Gen Xers and baby boomers. So there's a skills gap there. And organizations, we just haven't always been great at training and upskilling. So we're having to get better at that. Immigration is at a record low. I've got one organization that they are struggling finding drivers, and they're having to recruit out of Eastern Europe. I mean, we're just these problems that we're having to get really creative and how to solve it. And then of course the boomers, which is our largest generation, is now exiting the workforce. And we knew it was coming. They kind of held on during the recession. And now it's like boom, boom, boom. They're exiting like crazy. And so it's multiple factors. And so I think we really have to look at that and not just assume it's like, well, I think a lot of people want to blame the pandemic and just kind of hope when things go back to normal. Like, hope is not a strategy. And no, it's not going to go back to how it was. So we need to think differently. We need to think about our cultures. Those organizations that focus on their culture pre-pandemic have better retention rates than those that didn't. And then two, during the pandemic, people inherently, it goes back to my point of people inherently want to feel like their work matters. And so law firms are really hitting a real low. I mean, they're getting hit hard because, we drove them hard. If you want to be a partner, you work 80 to 100 hours a week. And now people are like, why? Like, what I'm doing really matter? And so I think we have to rethink. And I think there's a way. So, employees now are in the driver's seat. They hold more of the power. And, organizations are being forced to think that way. So it's just, it's why I have a heart for leadership. It's why I've always worked with them. This is not an easy job, and it just got harder.
Hmm. As you think about the future of work, Kerry, how do you see the work you're doing leveraging analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, culture overall? Like, what do you think that new normal is going to be? It feels like certainly the balance has shifted from business centric to employee, or I shouldn't even say employee, more like workforce centric, right? Because
Mhm.
people outside of employees work at companies. What do you think that next normal might look like, if I could even use that term?
Yeah, I think we're going to get better at this. I mean, what I give humans credit, we may be slower. I mean, think, at the pandemic, we advanced 10 years in technology, like in 10
Yeah,
months. And so now we just kind of have to catch up. And so I think it's going to be really bumpy for a while. I think we're going to make mistakes. And I know a lot of people are really concerned about people analytics. We don't want to have bias. And I absolutely agree, which is one of the reasons why we got into this space is we care deeply about honoring the human. And
yeah,
so, we're going to make mistakes. But ultimately, it's kind of like, when you think about our, child development, when you're one and trying to walk, you fall down, you make mistakes. And I think it's going to be rough for a while. I really do.
mm,
I think it's going to be rough, but it's a good thing we've been working on automation because we're struggling trying to find people to, get bodies in the door. And
yeah,
so, I think everybody was fearful of it, but it kind of came at a good time because now we need help. We need help, and we want to put people in positions where they feel like they have purpose and meaning. I keep going back to that, but I cannot say how important that is. And I think we can use data to get, I mean, this is the great thing is I can see through all this mess that we're going someplace good. It's just, and how long will it take us to get there? It could be, 5 to 7 years still. And there's
yeah.
still going to be some bumps and bruises as there always are. But I think we'll get further. And that's just what I would say is I know AI feels hard for people. And number one, it was named poorly. So artificial intelligence, it just feels, but if you think about it as, super math, I would just say engage with it. It's okay that you don't know much about it. I haven't worked
Mm,
with one leader that's like, oh, I know exactly what that is. They're like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
tired. They're tired of hearing about it. So I would just say engage with it. It's going to happen. If you don't, you will get left behind because there's great,
yeah,
we need it to help us make sense of the data. And
yeah.
so no matter what data you're collecting, there's something that I can almost guarantee. We haven't yet found a data set where there wasn't something valuable in there. And so you've got some valuable things. We just have to kind of put on, our mining hats and mine through it and let it be messy for a little bit and then find the gold nuggets and then focus on there. Don't bite off more
Yeah.
than you can chew, but find the gold nuggets, focus there, and then you'll just get better and better.
I love always sage advice. Start small, learn, test, repeat,
Yep,
right? See what works
exactly.
for you and your organization. You are also, Kerry, a founding authority of the Motivational Research Institute, and you look at and help identify critical human factors to success. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the work that you're doing there as well? And why did you start up the Institute? And what is that doing for organizations or even maybe private citizens?
Yeah, so it was kind of our ability to really focus on research. Let's have this institute that benefits the
Mm,
community, organizations, and humans. And so it's just a space where we can take on some projects that we maybe couldn't take on, and it's really about how can we leverage and really use research to better society. And so one of the big thing, being a business owner and a woman at that, starting a business was hard. I mean, I always equate it to I felt like I was standing on a stage naked and everybody's looking like it just like there's nowhere to go. I can't blame my failures on anybody but
oh
me.
my gosh,
And
that's too
so
funny.
it was, and I just kind of have a heart for innovation and we need a lot of innovation in this,
Hmm.
in this world. I think we have some pretty big problems we need to solve. And so it's not easy being an entrepreneur. And so we studied entrepreneurs and we partnered with an angel investment group and we wanted to dig in what how important was the human factor and can we study that and then can we use that information to better help people make better investments, number one, because we see that women and underrepresented, races are not getting invested in. And so we wanted to study what is the human factor. And sure enough, we found that 78% of the success was due to the human factor. And so we looked at 120 different psychometric traits. We used the algorithm to really make sense of the data. And so now we're using it to how can we better equip entrepreneurs and investors, because we have the same mission. Both investors and entrepreneurs want them to succeed for different reasons, but still. And so let's figure out a way that investors can better help them and entrepreneurs can understand what is going to hold me back, because we are social beings by nature. And when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of feel like you're on this island by yourself. And so we, as humans, we're messy, and we have what I call derailers. It's a kind of probably the most talked about chapter in my book. But when you're put into an environment like entrepreneurship, it amplifies it. And so we have to be really careful. And so that's what we found. It was just so interesting. But that's what we found from the research. It was the derailers that significantly predicted their failure.
Wow. So you have this toolkit where, is it investors working with founders and coaching them on, here are all the potholes. So we're going to give you the road. We're going to give you sort of the street roadmap ahead of time.
Yeah.
Make sure you dodge these as you're driving and you're on your journey.
Exactly. And so that's what we've been building and working with investors on. So it's been exciting, and we're getting a lot of attention. I was interviewed for a documentary and on mergers and acquisitions. And so I think it's a way to highlight that, there's some underrepresented groups that have a lot of potential, but they may not have the resources that other groups do. And so, how can we start to highlight them? Yeah. And again, when we start focusing on other factors than just, the typical, factors that investors focus on, I think it starts to bring in and be more inclusive to the community as a whole. And then ultimately, we can use this to better equip entrepreneurs.
Love that. Such important work. I appreciate you for doing that, by the way. That's really incredible work. Yeah. Kerry, this has been a really interesting conversation. We could probably talk about this for the next 2 hours and geek out on this, because I personally, I love this. I do have one question for you, though. Where do you get your inspiration from? Now, talking for the last 30 minutes, I'm really curious to hear your answer.
Well, it's been a process, Bill. No, I think I've learned, early in my career, I thought inspiration falls down on you. Like, oh, I'm going to get this job, or, oh, this is going to happen. I'm just instantly going to be inspired. And I've realized over the years, that's not how inspiration works, that I have to be intentional, and it's really a full-time job. And so I am most inspired when I get to think strategically to solve a problem. And I love to dig into the research, look at the data, and then find a solution that's practical and works. That's like inherently. So it may be different problems or in different use cases, but that's what creates inspiration. But here's the little flip side to that I've learned, that there's a cost to that. And I think that's why it took me a long time to learn this, but we have good intent. I kept saying like, I know I love doing that, but I had to do this week. Or this happened, or a client asked for this. There was always a reason. I finally stepped back and took a hard look at it and realized, if I'm really honest, there's a cost to creating space for inspiration.
Yeah.
And so that means I have to turn off my Slack. I now have a practice where I take one day off a month, and it's my inspiration day, and I go away. I'm off the grid. Nobody can talk to me. And I think, but I had to get over that. And I tell people, do you have a need to be liked? Do you have a need to want to impress others? Or do you have a need to prove yourself? And that's what's going to keep you from designing inspiration into your life, because you will respond to that Slack message or let email just take you away. And so I think we just have to be honest and say there's a cost to it. Am I okay with it? And then how can I kind of set expectations? And I let people know, hey, I want to deliver great value, so I need some thinking space. And so then people are like, oh, yeah, great.
Have you ever thought about doing it like once a week or once every 2 weeks, or just increasing the frequency of that?
I literally had a conversation today with my team saying, okay, I know we're doing this once a month. Is there any way we could get to like every other week? So,
Well, I could.
yeah, to be determined, Bill. So I'll let you know how that goes, but we'll see.
Well, I'd love to hear how that works out. I think that's really, and I agree with, like, being intentional about creating that space for yourself is so critical, because there are so many distractions in our lives, family, work, like each one of them has 100 different things that can kind of pull us away. So, giving yourself the freedom, having the courage to be able to step away from all that as well is critically important, just from a broader wellness perspective, but also, being able to find that inspiration. Kerry, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some of your insights and knowledge with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about something I'm just inherently passionate about. So thank you.
I know we could talk, like I said, we could keep you here for hours and really dig in, but maybe for another time, maybe have you on the show another time. And thanks everybody for joining in this week. We're out. Talk to you soon,
Thanks
everyone.
for listening to Be Customer Led with Bill Staikos. We are grateful to our audience for the gift of their time. Be sure to visit us at becustomerled.com for more episodes. Leave us feedback on how we're doing, or tell us what you want to hear more about. Until next time, we're out.